I'm Katie Bruno, and welcome to Shakespeare, brought to you by the Nashville Shakespeare Festival. Today, we'll be talking about Shakespeare the Human. So, when we take the time to learn about Shakespeare's childhood, his upbringing, and his early influences, we can begin to gain insight into how he became the playwright and the artist that is still so celebrated today, some 400 years later.
400?
Whew. Hey, let's go ahead and preface this video by saying that there's still a lot of information that is not set in stone. Literally, there's no record of Shakespeare's early life. So, today we're going to choose what we think is important that is based on historical fact and share that with you, and hopefully you'll learn something new that you've never heard of before. Where was Shakespeare born? He was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, in England, about 100 miles northwest of London, in 1564. There's no record of Shakespeare's exact birth date, but we do know that he was baptized on April 26th, so it's estimated that he was born a few days earlier. He died on April 23rd, 1616, which many believe would have been his 52nd birthday. He was one of 8 children. Many of his siblings died either as infants or at a very young age. Shakespeare's father, John, was a glove maker, and at one point in his later life, he became a public official, kind of the equivalent of a mayor today. John Shakespeare, glove maker extraordinaire, married Mary Arden, which might sound familiar, so think of the Forest of Arden from As You Like It, which is a real forest. And Mary Arden came from a very wealthy family, so Shakespeare's family had some great status for the time. Now, Shakespeare's family status allowed young William to attend a grammar school, but it's thought by historians and scholars alike that he probably only attended school until about the age of 15. Some say Shakespeare was a voracious reader. Probably he was. But it's noted that he learned to read in 3 different languages. Pop quiz. What do you think those languages are? I'll give you a second.
German, Russian, Korean, Mandarin,
Pig Latin, French, Portuguese? Fresh out. Okay, time's up. Shakespeare learned to read in English, Latin, and Italian. In 1582, a few years after leaving school, Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. He was 18, she was 26. 26? Okay, Shakespeare. 3 years into the marriage, Anne Hathaway gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Susanna. And a few years later, they had twins, surprise, Hamnet and Judith. Hammy and Judy. So the historical record of Shakespeare's activities in the next few years after his first few years of being married are still relatively unknown to most people. And it's actually referred to as the lost years. But we have to assume that it was at that point that Shakespeare made his way to London and was starting to build a name for himself as a theater artist and a playwright. A few short years later, in 1593, the bubonic plague arrived and forced Shakespeare into quarantine. Ugh, the nerve, right? During William Shakespeare's quarantine, he wrote the very famous poem, Venus and Adonis. And he also wrote King Lear, and Macbeth, and Antony and Cleopatra. What a guy. 1 short year later, in 1594, Shakespeare founded and joined the Lord Chamberlain's Men, which is a troupe of actors and artists of all different kinds. So if you want to check out some of his friends that were also part of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, later the King's Men, maybe look up why were they called the King's Men. I don't know, something to do with King James? I don't know, look it up. So his friends that I think are interesting if you want to find out more about them are Richard Burbage, Henry Condell, and John Hemmings. See what you can find. Well, I sure hope you've enjoyed this very quick account of Shakespeare's life and that you learned something new. Thanks again for joining us for this Shakes Break, brought to you by the Nashville Shakespeare Festival, and we hope to see you again soon. See ya!